stop sharing.
Yeah, I'm gonna try it one more time.
Okay.
Working for me. So let's make like BT said, let's make it a little bit more collaborative and talk a little bit about kind of some more or less some resources and tools for people to get started with coaching. And then any questions and answers from the audience is always a great way to have people feel like they are getting what they need from these sessions. So as you guys probably noticed from my keynote, I'm a big reader, and I both read and listen. I'm assured by my boss that listening to books on Audible is the same as reading them. So, but sometimes I listen and then I buy the book anyway because I have to. Like I listened to Adaptive Leadership and I was like, oh, I got to get in there and really dig around. So as far as coaching is going, and I really want you guys to jump in, some of the most kind of seminal works that I have read that have really changed the way that I think about coaching, on obviously Jim's book, Better Conversations, and I'll put that in the chat. The other book that Jim wrote, I think is critical for just thinking about like systematically and systemically creating a coaching structure, I guess, more than anything, or like a system that works, is Unmistakable Impact. That book, it really is an overview of how administrators can support coaching, how coaches can support each other, how teachers and coaches can support each other, how you can create these learning teams that and use video. I just think it's like an overarching, just very empowering, beautifully written book about the idea of how can we come together as a system and create an effective instructional coaching kind of ecosystem more than anything. And both of those are by Jim. There's a lot of stuff out there too that hasn't been written by Jim. I would say if you have not read Liz Wiseman's Multipliers, and then the book that she wrote called The Multiplier Effect, which is specifically about multipliers in schools. Oh, no S on the end of that, just The Multiplier Effect. Have any of you read that book or listened to it? Oh my gosh, it is. So Liz Wiseman was a senior executive at Oracle for 17 years. And when she was there, she started noticing certain leaders were able to kind of multiply the intelligences of everyone around them and create these spaces for work where everyone was like working, like living their best life at work. And while other leaders, which she called diminishers, like diminished the intelligence. And it's just fascinating what she found out. And then she wrote a whole book about how you can do this in schools. So I would say that was something that I've listened to that book 3 times and read The Multiplier Effect about 1.5 times. It just really changed everything for me about what I thought about leadership, what I thought about coaching. And then, of course, I can't ever not mention Zaretta Hammond and her book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, because that book continues to change my life. I would say for coaching in particular, I believe it's chapter 7, where she talks about the relationship between teachers and students and how when we see student differences as deficits, we are creating microaggressions for kids, and that we can coach in on that, because Zaretta was a coach too. And I just think she's so brilliant. And I think that she, unlike a lot of people that write about coaching, I think that she gives you tools. And I think that's what people need. They need actual stuff, not just theory, but stuff. And I think that book is one of the best ones out there.
Awesome. Anyone else have any good readings or audiobooks? I have to get into the audiobooks.
I haven't read this yet, but I'm really looking forward to reading it over the summer and thinking about how I can use it in coaching. Is Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks. And, I've just heard really great things about that. And, I think along with Zaretta Hammond, and just what can we do to help these students who are marginalized in our classrooms and like make that such a much better experience for them.
Can you put that in the chat? So we have yeah. Oh, thank you. I see Coaching for Equity.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I like about Coaching for Equity.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is that she models questions and conversations and things, which I found very useful.
Yeah, and listening to the Coaching for Equity audiobook, I would not recommend, because the woman that reads it, it's the vibe of it just kind of put me off. So I stopped listening to it and read it, and I enjoyed it a lot more when my own voice was in my head. You know how sometimes an audiobook is made or broken by the person who reads it? If you listen to it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There are so many hidden nuggets in that book that are just phenomenal that get missed if you listen to it. So another book that was just recommended to me, and you can see I just got it, but I haven't cracked it, is called Not Light But Fire: How to Lead Meaningful Race Conversations in the Classroom. Have you read it, Meg? Has anyone read it?
I haven't read it, but someone also just recommended it to me. So,
yeah, the person that recommended this to me said it's just changed their life, and so I was like, "Whoa, I like a book that changes my life." So I'm going to put that one in the chat too.
Yeah, I know. Part of our coaching development, especially with, and I'm sorry, like sweat getting in my eyes. With a focus on, equity. We had the authors here yesterday. So if you were here yesterday, you actually got a chance to meet them. But we had the Power On graphic novel authors here, Jean and Jane. So that was awesome. We also have reviewed and read the Stuck in the Shallow End, which of course I'm sure all of you have read as well. Education, Race, and Computing book by Jane as well. But as a team, we actually get together ourselves and review different articles, different books, to come up with strategies, how we can utilize those with our educators when we go out to, the local schools and everything. So those are some other. Thank you. I was about to shut my mouth and type them up in the chat.
That's great that you mentioned that. We're going to use Power On in our coach professional development this summer. So they've all been mailed their books. Hopefully they're going to crack them open this weekend and be excited about it. But I think it's a really nice entry point into thinking about student voice and identity in the classroom. So yeah, and in particular around computer science, there's very few resources that are about coaching in computer science specifically. And so this brings in that like student computer science perspective.
Yeah, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book, and I enjoyed the diversity that was represented. And I know, and just this is just me personally, but when I first heard of the book, I was like, oh man, I hope they don't stereotype the characters. So I think they actually did a real good job of character development. Um, at the same time, pushing forward the goal in the campaign for us to really think about, um, you know, how can we increase equity? How can we increase support? How can we, increase achievement by the examples that they were given in the book?
I also
I
want.
see Amber Williamson is reading Stuck in the Shallow End for her class.
I love it. Oof, I love it. I also want to recommend for those of you who are feeling overwhelmed, possibly burnt out. Your body is, most everyone's read The Body Keeps the Score, or at least heard of it, because your body keeps the score. And this last year has been really, really difficult on our bodies and our minds. There is a book called Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. It's really geared towards women, but I believe anybody can read it and learn so much from it. And I read The Body Keeps the Score, but that book is really heavy and hard to read because the guy who wrote it is basically a trauma doctor. And so he writes about really, really awful stuff, childhood extreme abuse, and men that go off to war and come back and don't know how to handle what they've seen, heard, and felt. I feel like burnout is like a funnier, lighter version of like, this is how your body does keep the score, but here are some actual strategies and things that you can do when your body's keeping the score. And I absolutely loved it so much. I read it more than once, recommend it to everyone I know, and people who have read it also feel like this was kind of the cracking of the code for me. And I feel like a lot of times in education, whether you're teaching, whether you're coaching, whether you're being an administrator, your body keeps the score. And basically the gist of this book is you can leave work, but your body doesn't know you're not at work anymore. If work is your stressor, your body is still hanging on to that stressor. And there are some really great ways to think about, how do I complete my stress cycle, and how do I come out on the other and not feeling like a wrung out wet rag at the end of every day. So I would just highly recommend Burnout, even if it's meant to be for women, but oh my gosh, I just think it's good for everyone.
Hey, I understand that. That's why I lost my hair, because being stressed in the classroom, and it wasn't really because of the students. Sometimes it's because of right, the administrators or bureaucracy or whatever else was going on. And I was hoping that when I became a coach, that the hair would grow back. So, but that hasn't happened. But I am less stressed. Thank you, Don, for joining us. Great to see you. We're just sharing some resources in the chat. Just talking, just having a discussion. Okay. I was going to say something else and then I just forgot. So somebody else could go ahead. So, can you all share a link to the Cornell Toolkit and talk about that a little bit more, maybe in the cards?
Yes, I can. I have some slides. Should I share them or should I just chat? Yes? Okay.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. If it'll let me. Let's see. Here we go. Yep. Can you see it? Yes. Okay, cool. All right. So I won't go through the whole thing, but this is an initiative from Cornell Tech. It's through our teacher in residence program, which is actually coaches in residence embedded at schools. And so we have embedded coaches for the last 6 years in New York City schools and started to ask ourselves, how do we scale this coaching so that every single CS teacher gets coaching? That would be our, ideal vision. So that in turn, 50 million public school students in the United States have a CS teacher who's been coached. So our first attempt at this, I guess I'm not in slideshow mode, sorry about that. Our first attempt at this is this Computer Science Coaching Toolkit card deck. It goes really nicely with the CSTA toolkit, which I'm sure you'll hear about soon. So I will put the links in the chat, but I can also share this, and there's links on here. The card deck is completely free to download. It has all of our strategies for how we do coaching, but it also has our instructional strategies for computer science. And we're in the midst of a big redesign. So a version 2 of the deck. And so keep an eye out for that. That is coming out really soon. And what that's going to do is, so as you can imagine, we have like the whole coaching cycle. So we have cards related to each of those, but we also have these lens cards that are about like, how do we go about our coaching with these different lenses that are really important to us? And so we've thought of new ways for how we want to communicate these lenses and how coaches can use these in really creative ways. So that's what's forthcoming. And finally, I'll just put up contact info. So like I said, I am now an advisor on the project, so you're welcome to connect with me and reach out to me. But specifically, if you have questions about using the card deck, you should reach out to Joe Melendez as well. And so his email's there, and so is mine. And I'll drop the link now. And I'll stop sharing if I can. There we go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So because since you mentioned CSTA, and I don't want to, use it all the time talking myself, even though I participated on one of the teams, if I could go ahead and throw it over to Mr. Twarek to maybe share a link to CSTA and some of the standards, because CSTA has both student-centered standards, CS standards, and teacher-centered CS standards. And Meg Ray referenced the toolkit that CSTA has. I was about to say that we have, but that CSTA has as well.
Yeah, thanks, Sababu. Here is the link to that. Thanks, Jen, for the link to the teacher standards. So there are, as Sababu mentioned, there are not only student standards to drive CS instruction, but also teacher standards that undergird what teachers need to know and do to implement equitable and effective CS instruction. Let me share my screen. Here's a preview of, did not work. Oh, bummer. Got this. All right, well, I'll just talk through it since I also am struggling to share my screen. So the CS Coaching Toolkit is a collaboration among many people here. Sababu is an incredible contributor to it, and Meg also contributed to the coaching toolkit. And really what it's meant to do is just summarize coaching for the CS context and like bring some things together. It organizes the coaching cycle around a 3-step process, which seems to like kind of generalize what many of the coaching models use. There's the part that happens before teaching, which is planning. There's the implementing, like what happens during teaching, and it's thinking about the strategies and data collection, and then the part after teaching, and it's the reflecting. So most coaching models have those elements. Sometimes they're broken into more phases than that. And so for each of those phases in coaching cycle, there's a number of tools that are aligned to it. Something that helps for the planning part is another team created a self-reflection aligned with teacher standards, and that allows teachers to identify where their strengths and areas for growth are with relation to teacher standards. That's like knowledge and skills they want to gain. Another key resource in the coaching toolkit is differentiated coaching questions. They're differentiated along the kind of the different ways that teachers enter CS teaching. So some CS teachers have a lot of teaching experience, but little experience with CS. Some have, might come from industry and have a lot of CS knowledge, but be new to teaching. And others are in the middle of that kind of two-axis thing. So we think about those as 4 kind of entry points for the majority of CS teachers. And in that coaching toolkit, there are a selection of coaching questions that are aligned to both the teacher kind of roadmap role of like somebody who's new to teaching and new to CS, as well as aligned to the teacher standards. So the way that you might use that as a coach is saying, I know my teacher partner wants to focus on this indicator from standard 5 on classroom practice. And so I'm going to look at the questions in standard 5, and she is not new to teaching, but she is new to teaching CS. So I'm going to look under that section, and there's a set of kind of curated questions to select from to kind of use in my coaching meeting with her. One more resource that's included in that coaching toolkit is what we call the CS Instructional Practice Evidence Guide, and that's a look-for tool. So again, it's aligned to the teacher standards, and for each teacher standard, there are a set of teacher actions and student actions that demonstrate a standard in action. And so if the teacher's focusing on that, it can be a way of kind of planning what is the evidence you're going to be looking for during the teaching, and also like what did you actually see during that. And so it might be a way where the coach and the teacher plan for how can the coach be of service during the lesson to collect some specific evidence that is aligned to that goal. And so our hope is that look-for tool assists with that. So would you like to add anything?
I was going to say thank you. Did you want to add something, Jen?
I'm sorry. Did you? I'm Jen. But just quickly, I really I think this tool, the practice evidence tool the guide that you posted would be very helpful. One of the things that we do is what we call a learning walk, where we take a teacher to see another teacher teaching the curriculum with a focus on a particular instructional strategy to focus on. And one of the difficulties our teachers have when they're taking notes is, trying just to focus on action rather than evaluation. And I think that this would be very helpful in that situation for teachers to watch other teachers too. So just wanted to say that. Thank you. Sorry, Jen, please go.
No. The only thing I was going to say is that, BT shared those resources, and the program that we're developing is going to use a number of them. And so we will start off the year with having teachers complete that self-reflection checklist and then use that to help them set their goals for the year. And then the coaches and the teachers will also be using that evidence guide as they are doing their kind of planning part of the process, to think about, what are those actions, both the teacher and the student actions, that would be evidence for having achieved their goal in the classroom. And then, the coach can use that evidence guide to help note what they are seeing as they go through, and then use that as the centering point for their reflection process. So looking forward to using them and all of the great questions that the CSTA team has created. If you look at the standards, there's also one other resource just under inclusive pedagogies that has some things around culturally responsive computing, UDL resources, translanguaging, stuff like that. So I think, you know, as a coach, and we start to have conversations about, you know, if my goal is to improve some differentiation strategies, you know, then I might want to pull up that UDL for CS framework and use that as a part of the guide for the conversation in identifying what's possible, what can we do, and where do we want to start. So lots of resources there.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to mention something about that, having the CSTA teacher checklist or the self-assessment tool act as a starting point to collaborate to come up with some goals that the teacher wants to accomplish, whether it's for that school year, whether it's for a specific coaching cycle or what have you. But Yanek, I saw you posted a guide. So did you want to talk a little bit more about that resource that you shared with us? And I saw you shared actually a couple of resources.
Sure, I shared two. One is a coaching guide that myself and my colleague put together. It's just, you know, like our process and how we organize the school year and some of the things we do. And then the other is our coaching program started from a National Science Foundation research project. And so I also posted the 4-year report there from our first 4 years of coaching. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, and it seemed like where our conversation is going, is the importance of getting a picture of reality in the classroom by collecting data. And please, somebody tell me if you've already talked about this, because I was having technical problems and joined late. But
no, go ahead.
As much as we can get our teachers to agree to this, we find video recording a lesson is extremely powerful because, you know, as a teacher, and I'm thinking teachers in our audience would agree, sometimes when you teach a lesson, what you think happened during the lesson may not have happened, or other things happened that you don't know. And so that can be really eye-opening for the teacher. But with a caveat, though, when we do this, we tell the teacher, and it's really difficult, we're doing this not for you to critique yourself or necessarily watch yourself, but instead watch what your students are doing. And from this picture of reality, we're going to decide on a learning outcome that you want from your students. And then let's match an instructional strategy together. And that's straight from Michelle and Jim Knight and the instructional coaching group. Thank you for that.
Okay, yeah, that's one of the things that we really started implementing a couple of years ago in the Constellations coaching program with Atlanta Public Schools, is getting that video data so that the teacher and I could, you know, the teacher and the fellows could just kind of watch, reflect from the teacher perspective, as well as, you know, like you said, seeing, well, what are the students doing? And as part of that doing that, they're actually learning something and maybe creating something as a result of the concept for that day or unit by the end of that period. So yeah, awesome. One of the other things that we started implementing as well, and I believe that Mrs. Diaz spoke about this during the panel, was implementing that student work sample review and analysis, you know, which I think is very important. And part of that, as was mentioned before, is, okay, well, how is the teacher picking the samples that they're sharing with the coach? You know, is it from different student academic levels? Is it because the teacher just likes the student and wants to just show, you know, the best that's in the class and that's it? But I think that is something very important as well, in addition to the video data, is that those student artifacts that you can, you know, discuss.
When we talk about getting a clear picture of reality, like Dawn was saying, one of the things we talk about is that student work is also our clear picture of reality often. And so, and there are there are lots of ways, especially if you're engaging in some kind of deep coaching cycle, that throughout that entire cycle, you have to have a clear picture of reality. It is critical at the beginning, like Dawn eloquently stated, that you cannot base a goal on what you think is happening in the classroom. You have to base a goal on what's actually happening in the classroom. So that video recording and starting with the Coalition of Willing, anybody who's willing to do it, our newer teachers are coming out of programs that all use video anyway. So they're all very, very used to it. And so to record them and to record themselves and watch kids is nothing new to them. Oftentimes, those of us that have been in education longer are far more reticent, right? Nobody, and Jim jokes about it, like nobody looks at a video and goes, oh, look at me, I'm younger and thinner than I thought I was. Like nobody ever says that. And so it's just a matter of getting past that and the power of watching what kids are actually doing. It really, to me, what it does is it just reiterates to teachers how complex this work is. And it really, in a lot of ways, empowers them to see, oh my gosh, there's so much happening and I can't possibly see it all. And setting a goal based on reality is like saying that you're going to go do a Ironman when you've never even run a mile, like that's not going to be a goal you're ever going to meet. And so one of the big things we did, I was involved in a study for 3 years. One of the big changes we made was around using video, and it changed everything because I video recorded all my coaching sessions too. And I watched them, and everybody, all the smarty pants at KU watched them. And then we talked about it. And you talk about a sweaty minute, like you're up on the big screen, and we're going to talk about how poorly you're coaching, basically. But it was such, it was like, to me, it was like jet engine fuel, like it transformed the way that I coach, being able to watch myself. And so anytime we can get that clear picture of reality, it's transformational for everyone. But I also think we can't ask teachers to do things we're not willing to do ourselves. And so if we ask them to use video, we have to use video too. And that goes all the way up to the top.
Yeah, yes, I agree. I'm sorry for interrupting, but you mentioned some things, and remember I told you all I had this long outline, but you all covered most of it. But I wanted to, if you would entertain me, just ask this question from each person. How has coaching benefited? So give me one thing for each, if you could. How has coaching, in your experience, whether being coached or being a coach, benefited, 1, the student, 2, the teacher, and 3, yourself? Well, I guess I'll go first. So I know with the students, especially in computer science, and especially in some of those classes that are, let's say, code heavy, programming heavy, one of the benefits that I believe is they get a different experience. So in addition to those coding activities and lessons, we, come up with strategies to implement different types of activities, such as some unplugged activities where they're not even on the computer, such as some physical computing activities, throwing in some robotics, such as some art type activities, whether it be incorporating music, whether it be incorporating graphics, like one of our teachers actually did a session yesterday, drawing using JavaScript. So that is one that I'll say for the student. One for the teacher, I would say, is that empowerment, getting that respect. Teaching is, to me, the greatest profession in the universe. the greatest profession in the universe. So when you have a coach that is a partner, that gives you that support, that gives you that encouragement. It's not, even though, the coaches are observing you, but, there's not like, oh, it's shouldn't be taken in a negative way. As Michelle Harris stated before, everybody can use a coach. The best people in the world can use a coach. And when you made that reference about, and I'm sorry if I say his name incorrectly, Atul Gawande, the surgeon, it reminded me of this episode of The Resident, where the character Malcolm Jamal Warner plays is like a pompous surgeon, the best in the world. He's a specialist, and they brought in a coach for him. And at first, he's like, I don't need a coach. I'm the best. What can they sell me? But he actually learned and grew from that coaching experience. So, and I think I just kind of went way off on a tangent. Okay, so now one for myself, one benefit for myself is it challenged me, one, to be disciplined, where I'm not trying to provide all of the answers. I'm not trying to give all of the answers. I'm not trying to say, well, you did this wrong, or do this the next time, this is better, or what have you. I mean, of course, sharing some resources that they can investigate and see what fits with them and the classroom culture, but allowing them time to come up with their own solutions, their own resolutions, by asking some of those coaching questions, asking some challenging questions, making them feel a little bit uncomfortable, here and there. So I'll stop there. Otherwise, I'm gonna start rambling again.
I can share an example from some coaching this year that I did with a high school computer science teacher, and I actually think it was the same benefit for the students, the teacher, and the coach. And so this particular teacher was frustrated by the collaboration that was going on in the classroom, or the lack of collaboration. And so as a part of our coaching conversations, we had to define what we meant by collaboration, and what were the student actions and things that we wanted to see as part of that. And so like my initial thought about collaboration, I'm thinking like structured group work and pair programming. And this teacher was coming in terms of thinking about collaboration, like when they get stuck, who do they go to? Are they thinking about using their peers in the classroom as a resource? And then part of, so we're defining that there. And then part of what the strategy was that we came up with was for her to have a conversation and do some brainstorming with her students on what being a good collaborator means in the classroom. And so having the students define that. So, as part of that coaching conversation across all of those levels, I think we all had a better understanding and definition of what we wanted to see out of collaboration. So.
I can go. I love that you mentioned that resident, because you're like the fourth person. We tried to get the clip, and of course, it's going to cost us $75 million or whatever. So, but no, it's a good one, and it's perfect when it comes to recognizing that everyone needs a coach. But I also want to say I love this question, because when I'm listening to all, and how do I even narrow this down? So here, I'm just going to go with my gut on this one. So I feel like with how coaching helps students is that they see that learning doesn't end. They see that their teachers are learning as well, and that the learning environment is something that never ends. And the more transparent teachers are about being coached, and the more transparent coaches are about learning from teachers with students, the better off it is. I also feel like one really important thing, especially when it comes to using formative assessment, digging into classroom data, is that kids don't get left behind. I think so often we just you know, if they just sit and they're quiet, they get left behind. And I know we hate that term, but because, you know, we know why we hate that term, but they do get left behind. And I think as a former teacher, I know I left kids behind because of pacing guides or because of calendars or because of whatever. And I think with coaching, one of the things when you dig into that data is kids don't get left behind. As far as the teacher, I think the biggest thing for me, and there's so many benefits, but the biggest thing for me is their knowledge goes up, therefore their confidence and their empowerment goes up. And you see that in their affects from the beginning of a coaching cycle to the end of a coaching cycle. And it's incredible. And it's different for every single person. But when, you know, they get this level of empowerment and confidence where they feel like so much better about whatever it is, whether it's, you know, behavior stuff, whether it's content, whatever it is. And I think last for the coach, for me, I learn so much when I'm a coach. I learned so much about teaching. I learned so much about learning. I learned so much about kids. I learned so much about myself. I just feel like it's this, I feel like I kind of tripped and stumbled into this work, and it is absolutely what I'm meant to be doing. Because it's just, I just never stop learning, and I love that feeling. Love it, love it.
I could go.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I think one thing that hasn't been brought up yet that is a benefit to the kids is that I, as a coach, come in without any baggage attached, without any labels attached, right? I don't know if they have an IEP. I don't know. I wasn't part of the conversation 10 minutes ago in the teacher's lounge. And so I'm able to see them a little bit removed with fresh eyes. And that lets me ask questions that maybe aren't asked because the answers are all assumed about that kid. And then I think I'm thinking specifically about a CS class that I had that was like the bad class. They were notorious, like a girl, like bit a district administrator when they came in to observe. It was like everyone was like that class. So for me, I got to practice. I got to kind of experiment. I was like, let's really push the bounds of social emotional learning in computer science in here. And the teacher got to feel like refreshed, like, okay, I have someone helping me. It's not just a throwaway. And I get to try new things and be playful with it. It kind of freed her up from that. And so the outcomes were great for all of us. And so I love to see examples like that. Okay, Dawn, I'll let you go. Sorry.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to tell a little bit of an anecdote too to answer this question. And with Jen's response and Meg, yours, it made me think of a situation this year, and that sort of addresses the three things that you asked about in terms of benefits. And a teacher I was working with, a high school teacher, Spanish teacher, teaching a computer class for the second time. And in a difficult, challenging classroom, a combination of a classroom of diverse learners, and the other half were English language learners. And but one of the things that she prided herself on and was very sensitive to was getting to know her students, in particular, really invested in trying to find out whether or not they understood the concepts and the objectives. And we're learning computer science, mainly a lot because of the student population. And so one of the things that as part of another research project we do is give an end of, I don't know if you can see that, it's an end of unit survey. And it includes some questions, like from the tripod 7 Cs, if you're familiar with that, about, about confer, caring, like how well does my teacher know me kind of thing. And so one of the questions was about my teacher understands when I understand or I'm learning the concept. And out of like the 20 students, she had 5 students that said no. And she at first was very upset about this, but then after talking, we said, you know, I helped her realize this is an opportunity. And one of the aha moments she had was that while she thought very much about scaffolding and differentiating the lesson for all the various abilities in her classroom, one thing she didn't think about was varying her types of responses and how she checked in with students. They were primarily just verbal. And so based on this feedback, she went back and changed how she asked students whether or not they understand. There were polls. She asked them to draw a picture of a concept. She asked them to finish a sentence or tell a story. Anyway, it just made me think of that, and just a great moment all around for students and the teacher. And I felt really great. So.
I liked Michelle's point earlier around teachers as a model for like continuous growth and like learning. And I've seen some skillful teachers who have invested their students in kind of classroom-wide goals, like really their professional goals for the teacher, but they become like, we're in this together, and being very transparent with like, here's what like I'm working on, and asking students to help her collect data on, you know, if it is about who is participating and who is not participating, or what does group work look like. If you can be incredibly explicit with those practices that you want to see, then you can also train students to be the one who can like kind of act as the coach in being that set of more objective eyes, as Meg was saying earlier. And I think that getting students bought into these goals of like, how are we as a classroom community going to do this better, is a really powerful thing. They can kind of extend, like, you know, the planning can happen in coaching, in the coaching sessions, but then it could be a practice that happens in a more like ongoing basis.
Oh, awesome. So we have about 4 minutes left until lunchtime and networking and the next, checking out the expo and the next prize drawing. So if you had any other resources from which you pull, any other links you can share, like I know, and I'm try to put some in as well, but exploring computer science, right? So we can put that link in there. The Kapoor Center has a framework for culturally responsive and sustaining computer science education. We can put that link in there. Last year, we actually, as part of the summit, had the rights to have a watch party for Coded Bias, the movie. And some other things. So Microsoft, now I'll say Microsoft Teals. They don't do coaching. However, when you're thinking about a teacher that needs help, they do have like a different model in their program where you can have a professional, industry professional comes in and teach. And this kind of relates to the content knowledge portion, because sometimes we forget about that. Many of these computer science educators are coming from different disciplines without that computer science background. So in addition to, sending them off to workshops and camps and, boot camps and things like that, mainly they cover pedagogy. But what about the content? I can't learn a whole course in 1 week. I'm sorry, I just cannot do that. But one of the things that Microsoft Teals does is bring an industry professional in, and one model is that the professional just teaches the class as far as mainly the content, whatever. The second model is the professional co-teaches with the teacher. Then the third model is the professional acts as support to the teacher. So they have some things for which might be beneficial in your circumstance. I know here at the Constellations Center, We are currently, even though we have done consistent professional development with our teachers in the Atlanta Public Schools, we are actually developing a professional development, a CS equity professional development. One cohort is going to be for coaches, and then the following year we'll start another cohort for teachers. So trying to find ways to scale, the reach and the effect that CS coaching will have on our students in Georgia and definitely across the United States.
I think one thing that you just said there, Sababu, and coaching is not new, but coaching in computer science is going on, in like a few pockets and is starting to like build momentum. But we're still learning a lot and how that might be unique and different than coaching in other areas. And so I'm just really excited about like these kinds of things that the computer science equity, professional development, and things like that are going to be coming out over the next couple of years. So I just think there's lots of opportunity in this space soon. Oh, the sold resource, whenever I think about like what are best practices or evidence-based things that I could be doing in the classroom or that are like part of the school system, that's a really nice resource that always goes back to the evidence about what works. And so I think, a lot of what is in there about, say, malleability is these growth mindsets and culturally responsive pedagogy and UDL is in there. And they're tied into the CSTA standards as well. But they have a kind of like broader set of resources and thinking there. So I just love that it's like the evidence-based. And so I use that to ground myself in the idea of, has this really been shown to work?
Okay, we're at time, but one thing I did something else I wanted to say, if you all didn't mind, is that the people in the audience and the people that watch this afterwards, all of these different entities that are represented up here, the different coaching models that have been discussed, the different resources, we're not saying that you have to pick one or another. We're not competing against each other. If you notice when we speak, there is a lot of alignment. There might be some slight differences or slight focuses, but we're trying to collaborate, for the same thing. So did want to mention that. So pull what you need and can use for your situation.